Welcome everyone to DIGG Dojo. So let's just get the big news out of the way first. I'm dropping in the chat now the link to our snapshot for DIGG improvement proposal number 1, which is pausing the negative rebase. So this is a big milestone because this is the first time we have sort of an independent governance mechanism for DIGG set up. So this snapshot, thanks to some work by Mitch and the team yesterday, is going to look at everyone's DIGG balance in your wallet, in BDIGG, in other smart contracts, in the LP. So it should be like an even look at everyone's DIGG holdings for voting power for this first DIP. And looks like about 25 wallets already voting, so that's great. If you haven't voted, go vote now. This should be pretty, it's open for 48 hours, so it should close on Thursday morning. So I have a little bit of time, but go vote. This is exciting, guys. So I think what we wanted to talk about today is the next step after this. So we're going to be turning off negative rebasing, presumably, if this passes, and that will do us some good. That's kind of like a quick test that we can run. But what is the next phase for DIGG looking like? And we've had a team, 1500 Badger, Hashair, a bunch of other people from the community have been hard at work putting together some scenarios for bonding mechanics or protocol and liquidity mechanics for DIGG that are many of inspired by the Olympus DAO model, the model of the protocol itself owning much of the liquidity, which makes it more stable. And there are a couple different ways we can do it. So why don't, Hal, do you want to kind of like take us through the simplest to the more complicated in terms of these scenarios, so we can kind of just get an idea of like the menu of options here in terms of like DIGG as an asset for other treasuries, or turning DIGG Treasury itself into a self-owning liquidity, and how those would work.
Yeah, I think the first thing that everyone is on agreement with is that like we need to find utility for DIGG, because utility for DIGG will help grow its market cap. So one of the options that like we outlined in this proposal was using the Olympus Pro bonding system, where we could allow for bonding of WBTC DIGG, and basically we're paying out in BDIGG for that. So you're giving users a discount to buy DIGG, basically by locking in WBTC liquidity. And what that does is basically the protocol is buying the WBTC DIGG liquidity. So that creates, this protocol owned liquidity, which is the, one of the big pushes that Ohm has been going for, that when the protocol owns the liquidity, you don't get these like rug pull scenarios where all the liquidity dries up and then the price moves around a whole bunch because of that. There was also some discussion Spada brought forward about being able to bond BDIGG and IBTC into the time ecosystem. And they were saying that this would be some new launch on Phantom, where you would be able to bond BDIGG and IBTC and in return mint time. So that would be different in that Wonderland would be buying all of the BDIGG and IBTC, different than Badger buying back WBTC a DIGG. And then the final thing that we sort of laid out in the proposal would be, we completely go off down this rabbit hole of sort of the own bonding system / high APYs, and create some sort of fork where not only could you bond WBTC and DIGG to mint BDIGG, but you would be bonding a lot of the different things in the Badger protocol to mint either BDIGG or some new token. So there's a lot of people that have had a lot of opinions about which is the best way forward. I would just say that I don't have a lot of information about the time bonding. That does seem like it would be trivial as far as like dev work is concerned. The Olympus Pro to do the WBTC DIGG bonding would require us to consider minting more dig. And my opinion is that whether or not negative rebasing is turned off, I'm indifferent as far as those things that I'm describing, in that if we increase demand for dig and the market cap is expanding, then having the negative rebasing off actually wouldn't do anything because the supply would be expanding anyways. So yeah, there is this question though of, if we want to do the bonding type system for dig, we pretty much have to print more dig because there's not enough dig left in the treasury to incentivize that. So yeah, I guess like the key points are, there's this time bonding system that we could be pushing more energy into. That was something that Spada had mentioned, and that the Wonderland people, like Danny specifically, were interested in. So we need to follow up on that. And then the other, like, short term, sort of midterm thing we could do is look into the Olympus bonding and try and get a WBTC dig bond to mint more VDIG. Yeah, I personally like the idea of the Treasury controlled liquidity. I also think that the problem with a lot of this is just that it's a bit of a complicated move. It's a little bit complicated to interpret, and then people seem to have a bit of like a, there's two time pressures. One is that we're running out of emissions for dig, and then the other time pressure is like everyone kind of thinks that the Olympus bonding thing is going to see a million clones, and if we're a first mover, there's a chance that we can stick there, and if we're not a first mover, there's a chance that it's all in vain. So yeah, I think that's about it.
What do you think in terms of is it possible to do both? So I see the DIGG bonding and that DIGG slash IBBTC going as treasury assets for time. That kind of strikes me as a category of a utility for DIGG, right? Which is what we want regardless of what happens, right? So regardless of if we do this WBTC DIGG liquidity or the own bonding with high APY rebasing, both of those, those are kind of internal DIGG mechanics, right? So then this thing as DIGG in a external treasury, that's more of an external utility for DIGG. So do you see these things as mutually exclusive or complementary?
Yeah, definitely complementary. I think getting the bonding mechanism and Badger buying back the liquidity, I mean, it seems important. It seems like going into the future, a protocol owning its own liquidity seems very important, but also having utility and having DIGG be a part of other protocols creates that stickiness. And yeah, I think that both at the same time would be a very big.
Yeah. So I guess we were pinging Spada before this call to try to see where the conversation was with Danny on this, and it seems like they're open to it, but it's a possibility, and there's nothing firm yet. But so we know that Badger is going to be making a big push with IBBTC in the fourth quarter, and it just makes sense to kind of, I don't know, see if we can piggyback DIGG onto that, right? In terms of creating some kind of community desire for DIGG and IBBTC to be these assets for time. I guess both would need to be ported over to Phantom, right? And I'm not sure what the level of lift there is. I guess if it's
Right.
just if it's just an ERC20 token and it's BDIG and it's not rebasing, then you can just use a bridge, or I don't know. Do you know how that works, Hal?
No, I've never tried to move BDIG to Phantom, but it should. I mean, yeah, it should be somewhat trivial in the sense that we got it across to BSC and Polygon. And I don't think there was much work that needs to be done because it's just a ERC20 token, like you said. We do. I do think that we haven't solved any problems in the sense that we now have somewhat more of concrete ideas, but not really any way to move them forward. So part of what we put in the proposal was having Badger support someone that's gonna push these things forward from the dev side. We outline what we think the dev work is required. The one thing that isn't in the proposal is about the time bonding, because that was something that Spada had just mentioned in the rebasing channel. So yeah, I'm not sure who we need to follow up on with that, but I mean I think that would be great, and it would be an immediate solution to Dig's utility. Time is doing really well, so yeah, I mean bonding BDIG to mint time could be a great short term boost to the Dig market cap. So I guess what I'm looking for is like how we actually follow up on that after this call.
So I'm looking at the Wonderland assets right now, and they have time AVAX LP, time MIM LP, MIM, and WAVAX. So they don't have anything Bitcoin related. I know there's a proposal on to add WBTC to their treasury. So maybe they're kind of like, this is like the counterpoint to that. Like if Badger can come in with, okay, we've got DIGG and IBBTC as like the more decentralized Bitcoin flavors, and that we're adding. I guess has ETH in their treasury too, but it's a pretty small portion. I mean, like to my mind, it's kind of a no-brainer for them to be adding BTC as kind of like the ultimate reserve asset in crypto to these things. So maybe we just come in there with a proposal, just like say these are members of the Badger community. I don't know what kind of governance setup they have there, but yeah, I think we should pursue this as the DIGG community, regardless of what we do with like the more dev intensive stuff on our side, because we have to create utility for DIGG no matter what happens, right? And this seems like a good way to do that.
Yeah. So I mean, so do you see like what are the next steps? I mean, I feel like as far as the community is concerned, like we went out, we made a proposal, we asked for feedback. I guess some people are saying that they just realized that the RFS channel was there a couple of days ago. But for the most part, none of this feedback that we've gotten on the proposal is necessarily saying, oh, we should change this or change that or whatever. So it does feel like to me we're back at the same point we were at the last Dig Dojo, where we have some ideas that the community seems to like be in somewhat agreement on. It's just like, how do we actually push this forward? Obviously we got the contracts up to vote for the dips, so that was a huge move forward. I mean, is this something that we need to structure this in a dip and then pass the dip, and then part of that dip is like asking for whatever support we need? I do think applying to in time, asking them to bond our assets is different than the Olympus Pro system, where we would be buying back our own liquidity. But yes, I do agree with you that both of those routes are something that we want to pursue. So I guess what I'm saying is how do we go from where we are now, where everyone is like, yes, we want to do something like this, to actually getting it done?
Are you comfortable with sharing this Google Doc that we've been kind of working on internally? Is something we can put in the channel?
Yeah, it should be shared in the channel.
Oh really? Yeah, I thought it was in the dog one. Here, I'll put it in the chat here. So this is a Google Doc that 1500 and Hasher and some others have been working on, and so you can see in there. There's comments from the some of the Badger team in there. I guess, yeah. I mean, I'm not sure the exact governance route we need to take. It would probably make sense if we had a dip that said, with like a clear scope of the amount required to create this like the Olympus Pro thing. Do you want to get into the Olympus Pro and the fees that it charges and see, because like that's one thing, right? So Olympus Pro has this kind of off the shelf mechanism that's saying like, hey, we hear you guys like treasury controlled liquidity. Here's a product that will allow you to set up your own treasury controlled liquidity like and we're going to take a 3% fee and let you kind of just do a plug and play. So an aspect of that is, okay, we have to build in some way to pay for that 3% fee in addition to like the dev work of signing up for it and getting ourselves configured for it, right? So, okay, my audio is in and out. Hal, do you want to pick up on the fee, and I will switch mics here?
Yeah. I mean, I talked to a little bit about that with Jonto, and we had just been talking about how to build a way into the system where, through the bonding and the minting, we would cover that 3.3% fee that Ohm is covering in any dev work. So, this would be I can't remember exactly. I think we wrote about it in the proposal, but this would be at one of the points of like staking bonding that you would be paying either an exit fee or an entrance fee to do the staking. And I do think that the 3.3% fee that Ohm is charging is like perfectly reasonable in that one of the things that they provide is these signals that basically tell you how they think you should be providing the bonding, like what the parameters you should be setting on the bonding, so that it is a attractive discount rate to the market. That system that they use is, I guess, proprietary at the moment, and so they would basically just be providing a number for us to adjust those bonding discounts weekly. So yeah, that's what they provide for the fee. I think like the fee is not just you're not just paying them because they are like there first or whatever.
Okay, I've got my hardwired mic. Hopefully that's better now. So there's a question in the chat. How are we paying for bonds with Olympus Pro if the Treasury is running out of DIGG? Yeah, I think the answer is we need to mint more DIGG, right? And that's like probably like one of the third rails of DIGG that has come up in these conversations, right? Minting more DIGG for paying for any of these like more intensive dev lifts, right? So I think my position has been it's not enough to just say like we're running out of DIGG, we should mint more DIGG just to like continue what we're doing. But if we have a clear plan with a mechanic, like if there's a utility for DIGG and then there's this better mechanic for TCL, then that's a much different story. It's like, okay, we're minting DIGG with a purpose and it's going to have, a real shot with these changes that we're making, right? So I think that has a much better chance of getting support, at least in my mind. Like I would be much more prone to support it because it seems like, okay, we're raising funds for something that we think is going to have a better shot at working.
Yeah, and the only thing that like I think is an open question is we need to make sure that there's not some weird thing where like when we put the BDIG into the staked well, I guess no, that's right. There is no staking here. That's the part of Olympus Pro that I keep forgetting. Is like there's no staking like for high APY. You're minting, right, to get the asset at a discount. Am I right, Hasher? Right? I think that's what you said. Is he still here in the? Yeah, I
He's
see
in
him
the
typing.
chat. It says he's typing. Yep, Tridium says Boost is utility for DIGG. So yeah, like I think the utilities Boost is one, and then if DIGG becomes a collateral or not a collateral, but a treasury asset in time, then that's another one, right? Like if time and Ohm are going to be these two crypto reserve currencies that are working and growing very fast, then being a treasury asset for that is one external utility for DIGG.
Right. Yeah. That like so. What Nico and Hasher said. I mean, for me, the Olympus Pro bonding, the advantage would be basically like, for instance, I have WBTC DIGG LP right now, right? And so if the Olympus Pro bonding was there and there was some discount, then I could sell back my liquidity to Badger basically to increase my Badger boost, because I would be giving up that portion of WBTC to get more BDIG. So that does seem like it's synergistic with the Badger boost. And the nice part about selling back all the liquidity to the protocol is that when you do eventually decide to sell some of your BDIG, you're going to have less impact on the price. You're going to move the price a lot less. But I also think that locking BDIG into the time protocol is the complete opposite of that, right? You're getting rid of your Badger boost to mint time. so you're no longer going to receive the Badger boost. So the two systems like could work well together in that you use one to get more boosts when you need more boosts, and then you use the other one to like sell off when your boost when you have too much. And then you're selling it to a protocol that's going to hold on to it forever. I don't necessarily think that the route of like having the SB dig and doing this like crazy staked APY, basically like ohm clone is something we need to just jump up and like do. Having something besides the Badger boost for dig could certainly increase the market cap. I that's just my opinion.
So I see Tritium and Mitch in the listening channel. I'd be curious to see. We were earlier discussing bringing DIGG onto Phantom to use as the collateral for a treasury asset for time. Is that something that requires any level of dev lift, or is it just using a bridge and porting it across, or is there anything that Badger needs to do to enable that? And then while they're responding to that, I want to see like, so if did you have any like scope of if we were to implement this Olympus Pro treasury owned liquidity mechanism, like how much of a lift is that in terms of the Badger side for getting that spun up?
Sorry, you're saying like how much funding we would need?
Yeah, like okay, so if we're, one part of this is we write a proposal to time and say, hey, we want to onboard these Badger assets. That's one piece, right? And there would be no tech lift except for the moving to Phantom, if any. Then the second part would be, okay, if we're going to use the Olympus Pro for treasury and liquidity for DIGG, what is the lift for that, right? Minting DIGG, Tritium says, and then is there anything else?
Right. I mean, we would need to have someone supporting the bonding discount. So as far as I've heard, and this is just like from talking to the own people, is it something that has to be set like weekly, and that basically there'll be some sort of system that they have that like gives you output that says, hey, set these numbers, and then someone has to go in and actually put those numbers. I don't know if that can be automated, but as far as I know from Ohm, that they do it manually.
And that's kind of like an econ side. That's not really like a Solidity dev work type side, right?
To throw this
Right.
out there, if you guys want this to work well, right, and this is what Spotto was talking about, like we need a team, right? So like maybe that team is like a Solidity dev and an econ guy, but like there needs to be a few people I think that like own this, and I think we should give them like 2% of dig supply, like vesting over 2 years, right, and then pay them a little bit of USDC. But in my mind, this is going to go way better when it's not like us kind of being like, oh, like we think it's this and that, but there's some people that are really like working full time on this, living and breathing, and are going to get like totally rich if this thing works, right? Like that's how we're going to make it work. And I think the next step before hashing out all of these details again and again, what we need to do is like decide basically what we're going to do and then get those people together. And one of the questions for the DIGG community, I think like from Badger's point of view, we're really happy to stand up, like throw some tens of thousands of dollars at this to get people started and to pay them. But then the other question is, how much dig do you want to give the team? And I think that finding the right team and giving them enough dig so that they're going to like push this through and do whatever it takes is going to be the thing that will make it successful in my mind.
No, I completely agree with that.
And so to me, like these, the conversations, it's a good list of questions, but it doesn't make sense for us to go and try to answer them, right? It makes sense for you to find somebody that can answer all of those questions and is then going to start like taking this forward and writing code and coming up with like coherent proposals and actually like moving the ball.
Right. So I think we have somewhat more of a concrete proposal than we did, say, last DIGG Dojo. So it sounds like what you're suggesting is we take what we have written, take the pieces out of it that are concrete, and then try and, you just said it, like Solidity dev, econ person, and then some person, to lead them, or that could just be the, communication with community.
In my mind, for a good rebasing time, you also need like the master of shill, right? But maybe, yeah. So those three hopefully can. So yeah, and then the question that I think that the team's going to want to know, and that one of the things that the community needs to start thinking about is everything's going to involve minting more DIGG, right? Like to do the bonding, you have to pay people out in DIGG, so they're going to bond LP tokens. You're going to give them more than that in DIGG. That requires minting more DIGG. You want to stand up a team, that requires minting more DIGG, like whatever emissions. So I think the sooner that you guys can say, like, okay, like in this next step, we're going to mint another, I don't know, like 20% of DIGG supply, and we're going to give this much to the team, and then, you know, like set some sort of like some economics for that, right? That then creates the space economically, and then that combined with like the vision you have in the first steps, or like what, you know, like a path towards the end of the year to get things started, I think is then a pretty good basis to start looking for like a serious team on.
Do you still see Gitcoin as the place to go to put this up?
I mean, so Spada's thinking was as a last resort, right? But Spada's thinking was like, you know, like the better thing to do is to throw 2% of DIGG on the line, right? And then we know devs and like, you know, really try to find like a team that's like looking to like make it, right? Because if you're giving them a reasonable amount of supply of this token, that's almost more interesting. And maybe we could do it on Gitcoin, but I think Spada thought he might have some other contacts, and if we make it juicy enough, we might be able to like find a pretty coherent team already.
Well, that sounds like the way forward to me. It does give some credence to turning off negative rebasing if we're talking about printing more DIGG. Like, it just seems kind of silly to have the negative rebasing turned on over the next few months if we're talking about, you know, manually expanding the supply.
Well, it's interesting because you're manually expanding the supply, but you're not manually expanding the circulating supply, right? So you give this stuff to the team, it's vesting, you know, it starts in a year. Like the circulating supply doesn't actually increase for a year. And then, you know, like if you're paying out bonds, in a sense, like you're taking in LP and you're giving out DIGG, right? So the LP is then locked, and in some senses half out of supply, it's in LP, right? But then you're paying out too much. So it's a little more complicated. But yeah, you are fundamentally increasing the supply, and that will probably cause a bit of a shock that might make some people dump some DIGG, particularly if there's not real strong communications about it.
Does it make sense to keep DIGG, BDIGG rewards going if we mint more DIGG to extend that runway?
I don't think so. I mean, to me, that's what the bonding does, right? So you stop paying for LP and you stop paying for people to hold your token. Maybe you want to do like the Ohm thing where you give people a stupid amount of interest to hold it. But, you know, it seems to me like once you're taking in the bonds, right, that like it doesn't make sense to just keep renting. You're paying people to like, you're not even renting DIGG, you're like renting people to hold DIGG, as opposed to like having people paying people to lock their DIGG permanently with the Treasury, right? That seems like a better move. And I think that's the whole DeFi 2 thing that everybody realized and that we're trying to do. But it's up to you guys.
Well, so, I mean, I'm just hearing the next steps, like after this call, then are to follow up with, I mean, you know, the problem that I have is like we keep talking about all these things and it just keeps coming back to like the Badger team, right? Like, because, you know, we talked about like, oh, how are we going to go hire these people through Gitcoin or whatever? Well, you know, that would be something that like Wasabi and I and HashEra could do. But if, you know, if Spada has some team that he thinks could be hired, you know, then it, like, to me, that's like a negotiation that the DIGG community needs to make with the Badger community, for like, you know, we're going to give up this much DIGG if you guys will go out and hire us some devs.
No, I don't think it's like that, right? So I think the DIGG community, I think DIGG needs to decide what it wants to do, right? And DIGG needs to decide like what the offer to the team is, right? And then that's something that you can post on Gitcoin. That's something that you can post that, you know, like then everybody can go out. Then like, okay, here's an open brief. Like we're looking for a team, right? Here's the deal, right? And then there's a lot of means, whether that's, you know, like Spada's personal relationships, or whether that's your personal relationships, or whether that's somebody in the community that knows a good team, or, you know, whether we find it on Gitcoin. But like what needs to happen is like, we need a team. Here's the work that we need to get done. Here's the vision that we're trying to achieve, right? Here's how much like cash we're going to pay you to like survive for a little while, right? And then here's how much like Yeah, and then here's your upside, right? Here's how you're going to get rich if you make this thing moon. And that I don't think that has nothing to do with anybody. That just has to do with you guys still getting like your vision and getting really, I guess, clear on what your vision is and breaking that down into like some sort of an actionable document that has like rewards built in.
And what do you
All right,
see as
yeah, I
the
mean,
mechanism? What's the mechanism for Badger to get compensated for incubating this new version of DIGG? Is it Badger will
I mean,
keep some percent of the supply?
I would hope so. So like what I would like to see is that also like at least a few percent of supply goes back to the Badger treasury, right? Because we don't have any anymore. And so like, but our cost is like time and then some bounties, right? So like $50,000 USDC or some, under 100K USDC to like cover some people's salaries for a little while they get started. And we've got 15% of DIGG in the treasury, right? In TCL. So for us, it makes sense to make DIGG work regardless, right? And that 100K isn't that much money, right? And then the rest of it, if you're minting more DIGG to pay them with, then that's not costing Badger anything. I would like, and I think that I would like to see a little, if you're going to mint DIGG, a little also to be paid back into the Badger treasury, just so that the DAO has some holdings and more vested interest. But I don't think that's as important.
well, I mean, it sounds like we're 80% of the way there, and that the document that we have can be altered to fit what you're saying. I mean, I agree with what you're saying. It seems very actionable in that, like, we can actually get something done. So where the DIGG community would like come into agreement over that document is what are the actual percentages that we give to people, and then I think from what we've been talking about, the document will basically be saying that we want, to consider an ohm-like system, either Olympus Pro bonding, and then, to buy back our own liquidity. And then also that team should be focused on trying to get DIGG into, other projects, like, for instance, the example of Time.
Cool. Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
What about if you're Time? Do you, and Spot has had this conversation. I don't know, Trillium, if you have any more details about that, about using DIGG and IBBTC as a treasury assets for Time. Do you see that as like a Badger package deal where you're going to take both? You want IBBTC because it's backed by the vaults that have tokenized Bitcoin in them, and you want DIGG too? Or would you be happy to take one or the other and see them as separated?
Who's you? I don't quite
if you're
understand.
Wonderland, if you're Danny.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I think Danny wants to support Badger. I think he thinks DIGG's cool. I think the more the DIGG starts to look like Time itself, right? Which is like Ohm, right? So the more DIGG starts to be like a partially collateralized asset-backed thing, right? The cooler it is to be included in Time. So like if I were Danny, I wouldn't take DIGG into Time right now. But like once you guys have some assets and once there's like treasury liquidity and all this bonding thing is going in, right, then it becomes super interesting. But I don't really, I can't read the guy's mind. I have no idea. But yeah, in my mind, so the questions that I have, and maybe the DIGG community can't figure that out, but like if you want to do this, right, it's like how much TCL do you want to get through bonding, right? So if you're gonna bond, like how much Badger, I mean, I guess if it's going to be DIGG, Bitcoin LP or whatever, like how much of that do you want to take in, right? And then how much DIGG do you need to pay out for that, right? And then how much do you need for the team and how much do you need for everything else? And like how much DIGG do you need to get that started? And then I think like the dip or the BIP or the next step is like, we're going to mint this much DIGG. We're going to allocate it to these things. Right. And then you can go off and, have a clear specification. Some of it's for the team. Here's like what they're going to be doing. And then you can start like working from there. Maybe there's another step in the middle, but that, like we have to figure out how to pay for it. And like that's kind of and what it is. And then like get people that actually see that there's money there engaged.
Yeah. And I'm happy to go do that. I mean, we're getting to the point now, though, that like what you're talking about is like some real work that needs to be done. You know what I mean? And
this is real work. Believe it or not, like DeFi is real work and it needs to get done. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. So my point though is that there's no current incentive within the DIGG community for someone to come in and do what you're talking about. Like if I could go out right now and like calculate, like, maybe come up with some estimates and like throw some charts or whatever and be like, oh yeah, here's how much I think like you need to mint to print BDIG, but that's a real research project and requires work, real work to do well. So I guess I'm still feeling like we're stuck in the same exact place, which is, in order to move, we need to incentivize moving, but incentivize moving requires moving.
What about just like a dip to mint 2% of DIGG supply, right? And make it available to a team, or some percent of DIGG supply and make it available to a team over the next, like what you do need to figure out is like some vesting, right? But like once you've got that through, right, then it's like, hey, guys, like, look, there's all this money on the table, right? And then we can start getting people engaged and have them do the work, and maybe have a bunch of different people do the work and have them come back and see which one looks best, right? But the first thing I think is you need to dangle like an enticing amount of money, or we can just do a Git combine and offer like 20K. But I think Spada's really right that like the dev team that's going to like rock this and like drive it through, and the people that are going to make Dig Moon are the people that have a bunch of Dig.
Weezik's not on this call, but I believe there are still options, and we have this option program that's running quarterly now, and there's a percentage in there allocated to, Dig supportive action. So that could be like a little bit of a fund that's in there. But yeah, I think minting needs to be connected with like real forward progress, maybe, and just minting to pay for the initial dock towards the forward progress. I think just with the amount of time that it's taken us to do this first dip, granted it was getting spun up, so now we can move faster on it, but we still have to allow like a week for discussion.
Sorry, go ahead.
Maybe it just makes sense to do a big bang and build in some kind of like early supporter fund or something like that, right? I think getting 2 minting events done before the end of the year with all the other shit that's going on, I think that's a bit of a stretch.
So those are the two ways I see that you can do it. Is one, like, let's mint 2% of DIG, 3% of DIG, or not even we're going to mint it, but like when a team arises and we reach a deal, right, we will mint this DIG and we will put it in, like this escrow contract that pays out over this time, right? Maybe even based on these like metrics being set. You could go to UMA if somebody like if Hash wants to go figure out how to like write an employment contract for getting the dig in UMA speak, you could do something like that, right? So that's one thing. You don't actually have to mint it, but you need the approval, right? And then the other thing you could do is say, like, we're going to just mint 20% more dig so that it's in the treasury and we're not going to spend any of it, and there will be more dips that come out, right? But now there's like new dig in the treasury, and then some of our plans are, right? And we'll handle that through further governance. And again, assuming that people don't freak out, it does not change the circulating supply. So but like those are the two options that I see moving forward. Maybe somebody else sees something. Or the third option is to be like, hey, 50 grand if you can make like homework and dig. But then you're going to have somebody that's going to come in, they're going to do that specific task. There's still going to be a community that has a lot of different ideas and not like a strong sense of ownership. And I don't think that it'll like work out very well in the long run.
So we've been going for 45 minutes. I'm going to just throw it open. If there's anyone in the audience that has opinions on this and wants to be heard, please put your hand up and we'll get you up here. But yeah, I don't know, 1500, what you think, but I'd be happy to like work to develop this into a scope, getting the budget, and we can sit down and think about how much would be needed and try to back into it that way. But like I think that's probably doable within a couple of weeks, and now we have the infrastructure to do the dip. Do you think, Tritium, do we need to see a past dip and then go to a BIP for the Badger funding of this, or what do you see as like the governance critical path here? You guys are both muted, but I don't know. I think, Hal, you're got something.
Can you hear me now? Okay,
yeah,
I don't know. That was weird. But yeah, you were asking Trit anyways. But yeah, my mic stopped working right when you did.
Yeah, I mean, as a Badger holder, I would want to have a vote on this, right? Because it's spinning off a critical Badger product using funds from the Badger Treasury. So I think having the past dip gives ammunition to, says this is what the DIGG holders want, and then it gives a clear green light to the Badger team to say, okay, here's what we need to make this happen.
So in my point of view, right, like the dips hold no weight until there is a BIP that grants governance to DIGG holders, right? So at this point it is just signaling, and you don't even need to do it, right? You could go straight to a BIP. If you could make a BIP that says, hey, like we want dips to have, but so that's that. In terms of the money, in my mind, like, like up to $50,000 for like bounties and hackathons to bring in new devs is kind of just like part of our recruiting budget. And like that, I guess if you're already doing a BIP, it wouldn't need to be one, but like I would be comfortable doing that with a council vote or just like kind of doing that out of our budget. But for minting more DIGG, you absolutely need a BIP. Right? No question.
Well, yeah, certainly just because it's a change to the social contract of DIGG that's been around since the beginning, right? Like,
well, you're minting more. I mean, like it's a big treasury event, right? You're minting more of like a token. That if there's ever something that needs governance, that's it. And again, right now, Badger governance is governance. So you can do a dip proposal to like try to decide how much to mint. I think the bigger question is like, are we doing this or not? And then if we're doing it, maybe you just go to Badger. I don't know how you guys want to figure that out, but yeah, and then if you're doing a governance, you might as well say also like we want 50K USDC to pay people salaries up front, right? You could put it in a BIP.
Okay. Well, this makes sense to me. I mean, we've got this document, we've got a way forward. We need a BIP to mint more DIGG. We definitely need a BIP, or we may need a BIP to get this. If it's above 50K, you're saying 50K is kind of like the market or the dev recruiting budget. So if we go above that, we need a BIP. I would like to see a dip just as like, because we're minting DIGG, because it's like the social contract of DIGG that's been in place since the beginning, and it's a big change to that. But maybe we do them at the same time or something. I don't know. 1500. Do you see any other ingredients we need? And this is kind of like going in parallel to an outreach to Time to get us onboarded as treasury assets for them. Oh, we lost Hal again.
I just think the only thing that we haven't talked about, which Tritium brought up, is just like having that person that's like focused on marketing DIGG, because again, part of like getting DIGG in utility and other protocols is like so that you can do something with it. So people need to know what they can do with it and what it's useful for and that sort of thing. So yeah, I mean, I would just add that if we're going to write something that is trying to build a team, then we should include some funding to try and get someone. And I, personally think Badger itself is lacking in that aspect. That we are all people that use these every day, and so it's very obvious to us how to use them. But then when someone comes into this ecosystem for the very first time, they're still just sort of like, what do I do? Where to go? And that sort of thing. So I think DIGG could really use some love there with just people actually talking about what the narrative is.
Yeah, sure. And again, like, I think Crypto Moot brought up this thing about like, I wouldn't support Badger spend on this. So in my mind, spending $50,000 to bring smart technical economics and marketing people towards Badger is something that we just do as part of our recruiting process, right? If we're going to mint a whole bunch of DIGG and make that like a really juicy deal, then we're much more likely to end up with like the sorts of owner operator types that are going to bring things forward, right? I think something is how much dev work is there to be done. I don't know is the first answer, right? The second answer is whatever we think it will be more, right? And whatever like we decide to do, we'll decide to do like more things in the future. And then, the final thing is that right now it always comes back to the Badger team, which first of all, like distracts us. And second of all, like we never actually get it done on time. Right. So it's kind of just like it just like creates noise and isn't good for anyone. Getting a separate dev team there is just like it gives Badger more devs that are working, and like as the DAO, it's helpful to have that team there just from a people and like organizational and team like leadership management point of view. And then having somebody that actually owns Dig and like takes that would be amazing, right? Because then to CryptoMook's point, right, then the team doesn't have to be that involved, right? Maybe like we have override on a multi-sig so that like we need to like somebody does something crazy, we need to say no. But that would be where I would like to get to the point that that's all we're doing.
I think
okay, well, I mean, I think I have some ideas of like what I will work on between now and the next Dig Dojo. Hopefully we can hash these things out in the RFF. Seems like the place to do it since we've already started the conversation, but trying to get this document together that looks more similar to what you have been describing versus the document that's there, which the document that's there right now is more of a brainstorming on where we could go. And so I think now we need to turn it into, the document that explains where we are going.
Or, like for a team to come in and read a document of where we could go and pull it together is fine, right? So maybe that's what you present to the team. But the bigger question is, what's the offer to the team? I think that's what you need to think about, right? Is how do we want to now put out an offer that's going to attract some good people that are going to own this stuff, right? And maybe the answer is we need to be more clear, or maybe the answer is like, hey, we're smart and here's a bunch of brainstorming we did, and part of what we need somebody to do is like go through all of this and structure it and decide like what to do exactly. And that's up to you how you want to do it.
No, that makes sense to me. I mean, the big thing, which is what I like what you just said, is like there's a lot of people, myself included, that have a lot of opinions about the document and where we could go and that sort of thing. But when it comes down to it, I can't actually do anything, right? I can't make it go forward. So yeah, we need that person that reads the document, has the idea, and then also has the tool set to execute.
And like the bags, right, that they can win to do it well, right? So both the tools and the reason, right? The motivation. I think that's really important, right?
Mhm.
All you guys are here and you've got a little bit of dig, but like you're not gonna drop everything and spend the next like 2 months making dig boom, right? Because you've got other shit to do. Where somebody that has the potential to hook like 2 or 3% of supply, that becomes a much more interesting, thing to do.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Okay, so the action items then are to basically build a budgeting proposal around. I mean, I think we should, like you said, leave the document alone, sort of as it is, with a second supporting document that is talking about more details around how we're actually going to budget this thing and support it.
And I guess maybe the last thing, like I'm seeing in the comments and certainly in the other Dig comments, like there are people that are very against this. They're against a minting Dig and against, maybe Dig is working perfectly right now, or, it's keeping Peg better. But like, I think we should talk about kind of like the null case here, which is like Dig stays long, chugging along, emissions run out. Like, what does that look like for Badger? Like, because like we are like, I think maybe there are people that don't realize like that the Treasury, how much of a lifespan this Treasury Dig has. What would that look like in a month or two? And I think that helps to concentrate minds in terms of, okay, we gotta figure this out. And the second point is there's a whole spreadsheet in the Dig forums of like 5 or 6 other ideas for Dig. So, this is the one that, 1500 and me and several other people are most interested by. But like, if anyone wants to develop an alternative proposal, we're happy to have people on Dig Dojo and entertain other voices and give people a full hearing if they have other strong opinions on where we go with Dig, right? Like this is a community run project. And I think
Poe just made the point too, which I agree with, which is like we could just mint more Dig to continue on with the exact system that we have, right? I mean, just a little bit of some thoughts about like the negative rebasing that because I mean, look, I don't write a lot of code these days, but like I have nothing to do. All I do is sit around and like think about this shit, right? So thinking about like turning off the negative rebasing, like one of the things that could happen, right, is that all we do is we just have DIGG that's like no longer on peg, and nothing else is different. Like all the negative rebasing has done really is made it so that DIGG isn't trading at $10,000 right now; it's trading at 60. But in doing so, it deleted the market cap. So it would have deleted the market cap anyways. It just would have had a lower price value,
in a different
and then
way.
we would have been having a whole different conversation about like, do we need to get DIGG back to peg or whatever. So there is also this option of just like, and maybe that's something I could do in the coming weeks, and anyone that wants to help is like, what does the actual math look like behind just printing more DIGG and continuing on the road that we're on, right? It is hard for me to see how we get out of this without printing more DIGG. I don't think DIGG would do very well if it literally was just left alone with no incentives anywhere.
Yeah, no, I mean, and it was clear to me, maybe it wasn't clear to everyone else, right? But in the string of votes to subsequently like fund everything at the maximum amount and then pay out on neutral rebases, I mean, like DIGG community spent all the DIGG, and there was no question from the forum that like that was happening, right? So like now all the DIGG is spent, and yeah, then the option is that either it just has to like have no incentives, and I agree that probably won't work very well, or like you have to mint more. But yeah, that I agree. Like I was wondering, like I think I said I was wondering like why we were doing it, but now we've done it, and that's the option. Like that's the choice, I think.
All right. Well, we're just on time here. If anyone else has any final thoughts and comments, raise your hand and we'll get you up here. Otherwise, I think we have a path forward. We're going to continue on the scoping document and create kind of like an alternative reality where we print DIGG without changing the mechanics. In parallel, we'll reach out to Time and try to get DIGG and IBBTC onboarded as collateral, or as I keep saying collateral, as treasury assets for that. And we can proceed with a vote on this and move it to forum as soon as we get something that's ready to go. So unless there are any other comments, I will close it out here. And just a reminder to go vote on the Snapshot DIP 1, turning off negative rebasing. The link is above in the DIGG Dojo discussion. And thanks everybody for chatting with us today.